Greetings. In this video, I'll be giving a tour of my game room. Before we get started, let me just clarify that I'm using the term game room very loosely. I live in Japan, where space is at an incredible premium. Homes are quite small, and so there's really no dedicated space available for something like a game room or the so-called man cave. There are no basements. There are typically no lofts in any Japanese home, at least not in a standard middle-class home. And so if you want to have something like a game room, you likely have to be quite creative, quite wealthy, or you have to have a lot of you have to be able to use all the space you have purely for yourself. That is not the case for me. I share this home with other members of my family, and so I am forced to come up with some creative ways to create a game room. So let's go ahead and take a look at what I've got going here in this game room. Let's first of all, let's go ahead and spin the wheel on this slot machine here. This is a kind of a cool one for my space here. I'm not actually particularly fond of slots. I don't play slots. If I go to Vegas, I don't have that much interest other than maybe throwing a nickel in or a quarter in and see what happens, but I don't find it particularly fun, and there's the reason why. And this machine seems quite authentic in that sense. It doesn't pay out and you don't win. So let's go ahead and get to the heart of the so-called game room. So this is my hallway here, or this is our hallway. And it's a unique hallway. It's shaped like an S block in Tetris, if you know what I'm talking about here. So you got this kind of straightaway, then you make an immediate sharp right, and then there's another straightaway. And so I use these two corners as an area to put my game space, the games in this particular space here. So here are some quarter arcade machines. There's 4 of them. I actually have a few more, but I don't have the room to put any more up. So we got Bobble Bobble, Pac-Man, Galaga, and Dig Dug. Quarter arcades are just fantastic. I particularly like the fact that they're fully functional. They have a light-up marquee. They're to scale, and they're fully playable. I wouldn't recommend actually playing them, simply because they are quite delicate, and if you're like me, as much as you may tell yourself, I'm just going to play casually a round or two of Pac-Man or Galaga, once you get caught up in it, you're going to start playing harder and harder, and the joystick, it seems a little delicate. It's fully playable, don't get me wrong, it does fully work, but I would be very reluctant to play it with any kind of intensity. So it's very nice that it's a fully functioning replica. It's better than just having a model of, for example, a model car or a model train, those kind of things that some people have in their homes. Those are quite lovely, but this is cool that you have a model that actually fully works, so it gives you the sense that it actually is a real working arcade machine. So some of my older games here from previous consoles that I honestly haven't played all that much throughout the years. I just kind of accumulated them. Now on this shelf I have games that I definitely played quite a bit more. Super Nintendo games and my classic Nintendo games. Got Mario 2 and 3, and A Link to the Past for the NES. I got Super Smash TV, the original Madden Football, NHL 94, and Star Fox for Super Nintendo. And these are just a few. I've got many more games. I just don't have the space to put them on display here. So this is kind of a sample of some of my favorite games from each console. A few game booklets. One of my big regrets when it comes to gaming is having thrown away all the packages and all the booklets, as I'm sure anybody who's into gaming knows all too well. Those things are worth quite a bit now, and you kind of likely wish that you had them back. So I'm a little surprised that I still have this NHL 95 instruction manual from the Sega Game Gear. These little replicas here of the Super Nintendo, Genesis, and Nintendo are pretty cool. They're quite loud when you start them up. They play the basic music from each console. And here we got some PlayStation games. Honestly, I didn't get into PlayStation all that much. Maybe a few of the Star Wars games. We got Super Nintendo here. We got a couple more Star Wars games. Definitely some of the best games I think on Super Nintendo was Super Star Wars, Super Empire, and Super Jedi. And of course the Pac-Man lights are phenomenal, and I'll get back to that in a few minutes when I show you this arcade room in the dark. We got a little bit more to show here. Some of these Classic Edition consoles are really quite fun. I wish that I had the space to just kind of leave them on a shelf and ready to play at all times. Unfortunately, that's just not a reality for me, and so I have them still boxed up here. So we got the Genesis 1 and 2 for the classics, the NES Classic, the SNES Classic, got a few Game Gear games here, and of course the Miss Pac-Man Quarter Arcade. Very cool box and a very cool arcade tower. If I had more space, I certainly would like to display all of these quarter arcades, but for now, that's all that I can do is with these 4. Got a few Game Gear games here on display. Here's a few that I have. One of my favorite games was poker. The other, Joe Montana Football, was a fun one. Although I recently discovered, I believe, that that was actually produced or ultimately created by or finished off by EA Sports. I think this is something that I've heard about in a recent documentary that's available on Amazon Prime, and that they deliberately left out a lot of the play options to make Madden football seem that much better. So that was an interesting discovery that I made recently watching the documentary on Amazon Prime. Anyways, making a turn here, we come to the pool table. And given the camera angle that I'm using here, the perspective, this is a little deceptive. It looks, based on what I'm seeing here, it looks a lot bigger than it really is. This pool table is, I think, only about, I think maybe like 20 inches long or something like that. So it looks a lot bigger there. Got a Harley Davidson, the Marlboro Man poster above it. Doesn't really fit a game room theme, but it certainly fits a pool table theme. And I highly recommend that movie, by the way. I think Don Johnson and Mickey Rourke make a much better duo than Robert Redford and Paul Newman. And of course, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, but that's just my opinion, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that will disagree with that assessment. But anyway, so a couple of the signs here that kind of fit the game room theme. The Space Invaders sign that lights up. It's probably hard to see right now. I'll turn off the lights in a few moments, and you'll be able to see it in more detail. So a quick look at the arcade station from a distance here, backed up against this little miniature pool table that I had. You can see the Galaxian, one of the other quarter arcades that I had. The mini Neo Geo and the mini TurboGrafx 16 are behind there. I've got a couple miniature arcades here, or I guess they're called tiny arcades, and these are quite impressive. As you can hear, the audio is quite strong. The marquee lights up. The graphics are great. Really quite an amazing little unit, and a really little. These are obviously way smaller than the quarter arcades, and they're quite impressive. I wish I'd heard about them a little sooner. I would have picked up some of the earlier titles that were released, but at the time of this video, I think these are the only 2 that are still available on Amazon, from Amazon directly. Some of the earlier titles that they released, of course, are available on eBay and from third-party sellers on Amazon, but those are the only ones available on Amazon at the moment. So let's go ahead and turn off the lights, and you'll see that this is where the arcade station really shines. No pun intended, just a perfect literal description in this case. I think this kind of glow of the screen and the marquees, it just creates such a nostalgic atmosphere. It's really reminiscent of those 1980s arcades that you would have remembered when you're a kid. It just it's very peaceful. I think it's very nice, the atmosphere that it creates. It's relaxing. And of course, as I said, it just takes you back to that time period. And everything here that lights up really, again, in this case, maybe the pun is intended. It really shines here, right? This is terrific. The ghost, you really see the light changing, the colors changing on the ghost. The ghost light at the bottom actually can, you can change the settings so that one ghost lights up at a time. That's cool too, I suppose. And this 1/6 scale arcade of Missile Command is quite nice in the dark as well. And one thing that I'd like to note about this particular arcade cabinet is that the demo mode maintains the audio, and I really like that part. This gives you the true authentic feeling of being in an arcade. As you'll recall, when you weren't playing the arcade machines, they still had sound. They had the demo that would play for 30 seconds before going to the high scores and so on. The quarter arcades that I have here in the hallway, they don't have any audio when they're not being played. And I think that's unfortunate. I really wish that you could just have them on in the background, because ultimately, as I said, I'm not interested in playing these. These are really just for the atmosphere, they're for display. They're to create the illusion of being in a classic arcade. It's creating a miniature arcade in your own home. So the only time that they have audio is when you actually start them up and play them. And that's okay, I suppose, but that would have been a nice feature. Of course, I don't know. Perhaps it's something to do with the game title. I don't remember that off the top of my head whether Galaga or Pac-Man would actually play audio in the demo mode. Maybe that's just Missile Command, I'm not sure. But that's one thing that I noticed. So one quick pass through all of these light up marquees and the signs on the wall here one last time. As you can see, it's really quite nice in the dark. It just, the glow of the screen, the glow of the marquees is just terrific here. Real quickly before we wrap up, you may notice in these plastic cases here that there are some Mario figures or some Mario cutouts in 8-bit format from the original Mario game on the NES. These were actually giveaways on soft drink bottles that you purchase in convenience stores. And these are very cool. As you can see, there's a lot of different figures here. You got the Goombas, Mario, different types of Mario, the Piranha Plants, and there's several more that are not even on display here. And these now are just absolutely perfect for this kind of display. Anyhow, that just about does it for the room tour here. I'll likely post some videos in the future on some of these individual items specifically. And so for now, that does it. Thank you very much for watching.